Hello and welcome to another episode of our Facts First podcast. Ako po si Christian Esguerra. Maraming salamat po sa patuloy niyo pong pagsuporta sa ating podcast. Ang episode po natin ngayon ay isa na naman po importanteng diskusyon tungkol sa isa na namang napakahalagang issue. Kamakailan po ay pinirmahan na ni President Rodrigo Duterte ang batas against child marriages at meron po itong implikasyon sa ating mga kapatid na Muslim at yan po ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon. Now, this episode is still part of our special series on the Bangsamoro, and this is done in partnership with the Institute for Autonomy and Governance. At bago ko po ipakilala ang ating special na panauhin para sa podcast na ito, of course, I'd like to remind everyone to like and subscribe my YouTube channel at para tuloy-tuloy lang po itong ating ginagawa. Okay? So, at this point, I'd like to welcome sa ating podcast ang nagbabalik ang ating isa sa mga paboritong panauhin dito sa podcast, si Attorney Michael Mastura. Siya po ay dating congressman. Siya rin po ay naging miyembro ng 1971, naging delegado sa 1971 Constitutional Convention at napaka-importante po ng itong kanyang isang papel dito sa pag-uusapan natin ngayon. Siya po ang naging project director ng task force na binuo para sa codification of the Islamic Code from 1973 to 1976. I'd like to welcome on the podcast again, Attorney Michael Mastura. Maraming salamat po for joining us.
Thank you very much, Christian. I am happy to be with you again.
Okay, himayin po natin itong bagong batas na nilagdaan ni President Rodrigo Duterte. Basically, RA 11596, so prohibiting the practice of child marriages in the Philippines. Okay, pag-usapan po natin kasi nagkaroon ng mga concerns dito yung mga kapatid nating Muslim na this might go against the tradition and practice at even the law. Okay, ano po ba ang tingin niyo dito?
Napakagandang tanong po yan sa inyo. In fact, meron direct question when you invited me here. Si Attorney Benny Bacani, kung na-amend na ba indirectly or directly yung any provision of the PD 1083, yan yung tinukoy ninyo na Muslim Code or Family Code of the Philippines. Itong law na ito, Republic Act 11596 ay sang-ayon sa mga konvensyon tungkol sa protection ng rights ng bata. Ngayon, this brings about, the key word here is abolition of all traditional and cultural practices and structures concerning child marriages. So, very clear, it abolishes. We can explain that later on, but the point here to know is that there is a movement to criminalize yung marriages ng mga minors, regardless of religion, race, or nationality. So there are conventions to that effect.
So this is just being consistent doon sa mga conventions na umiiral sa ibang mga bansa, ano? At pero on principle, this is the way to go. Tama po ba?
Yes po.
Okay, this is the way to go.
Ay bawal kasal o magpakasal ng bata, meaning bata, ang bata dito kasi meron na rin consensus dyan, age 18. Pero I check yung provisions of law concerning marriages sa Muslim countries. Karamihan, they extend down to 16.
So merong pagbabago pa. Sa atin, ginawang 18. Sa ibang mga 18. Muslim countries, 16.
16 po. That's not, anyway, it's a legislation.
So ano po yung direct impact nito sa ating mga kapatid na Muslim, for instance? Unang-una, gaano pa po ba ka-rampant yung child marriage practice sa mga Muslim dito sa Pilipinas po, for instance?
again, in terms of your program facts, I check again the status of compliance with this. Hindi po gaano karami yung child marriages sa mga Muslim countries. Karamihan po sa South Asian countries, India,
Pakistan.
sa Pakistan, sa Bangladesh. But overall, especially in Southeast Asia, hindi po umuurong sa 18 or 16. In Malaysia, very definitive that anything below 18 has to be referred to the Sharia courts. Kaya po maganda yung nabanggit ninyo, yung proyekto about family code. Kasi ang implication nito, hindi naman siya directly amended. So meron implication, meron mga tao, even including babae, na tutol dyan dahil doon sa just one key concept, that is betrothal. Now, dito sa Pilipinas, with due respect to the tribals na communities, ang mga Marano po ang madalas na meron silang betrothal, yung mga families, big families, clans, for many reasons, they will enter into hindi ito prenuptial agreement. Iba yung prenuptial agreement. Ito, agreement to contract or engagement.
In short, pinagkakasundo yung mga anak between families for different reasons. Yun po yan.
Therefore, meron implication but it does not directly amend PD 1083. Kasi diyan sa, I hate to be very legalistic, but diyan sa section 13, article 13 o paragraph 3 ng PD 1083, yan yung applicability clause, tinatawag, mag-a-apply ba. Meron din general provisions on restrictions of legal capacity. Ito, very general provision consistent with the Civil Code of the Philippines and subsequently amended by the Family Code na executive order ni former President Cory Aquino. So, if you correlate this provision, kasi na-consulta din ako dyan, yung when they were drafting this Republic Act 11596, kung tutol ba ang mga Muslims diyan. I said it depends on how you interpret that, no? So sa ngayon, ang main concern is yung tinatawag na criminalization. You criminalize kung violation, may violation niya, then there is a corresponding fine, or even it can extend to imprisonment, no? So this I call together yung tinatawag na Prohibition Act, or kasi abolition is a very strong word, but historically meron yan yung abolition of slavery, for example, abolition of the yung trade of liquor in the US. Yan, Prohibition Acts yan that led to penalties. But mostly the commonality of factor there is trade of slave trade or liquor, or yung yung smuggling in the days of smuggling.
Basically trafficking.
So ngayon, maging relevant yan sa human trafficking. So kaya ako, I went for this law, this Republic Act 11596, for a higher public interest. I can explain that in terms of Islamic law, if you will ask.
Sige, bago po natin himayin yan, yung paliwanag na po yan. So, ano po yung direktang implication nito? Sabi nyo, hindi naman directly ina-amend yung Islamic Code po, yung PD 1083. Pero for instance, kunwari, merong dalawang Muslim gusto magpakasal. below 18 sila, clearly covered to ito ngayon ng prohibition, 'di ba, ng RA 11596. Ano po yung magiging
Yes.
epekto nitong batas sa kanila?
Well, it brings about the question of penalties. Kasi essentially, it's about prohibition, binabawal. Now, if you extend it to criminalization, ang ibig sabihin, act na yun ay magiging criminal. It's more looking at the effect. The effect is nandyan din sa law and in the conventions that it has no legal effect. In other words, it's void, not valid from the beginning.
Void
So,
ab initio, yung kasal na yon.
Pero diyan magtatalunan ng mga interpretation. In other words, kasi this is about marriage. Dalawa po sa context law, yung tinatawag na status and then the condition for that status. Yung status, legally married ba sila o hindi? You are either married or not married. No? Now, cohabitation is also prohibited. Or maaaring kasi mag-effect ito even sa LGBT. Halimbawa, dalawang mga lalaki and magpakasal, below 18 sila, maaaring tamaan sila nitong, or isa adult, another is minor. An important point here is the minor. The other key consideration you have to factor in as a fact is hindi lang yung age requirement, yung consent. Meron bang consent? Kung under parental consent pa, sa Islamic law naman, guardian in marriage. Meron kasi tinatawag na guardianship sa minor child. Then there is a guardianship sa in marriage. You see the English word literally give in hand, no? Yung babae, palad mo yung babae na mag-asawa. So that is a consideration.
Okay. Again, for instance, yung couple po, no? Assuming na lang, for example lang, parehong minors. So, pwede ba silang tumakbo doon sa protection ng PD 1083? Kahit meron ng bagong batas prohibiting the practice of child marriage. Can they use that as an argument?
Hindi po sila pwede kung hindi sila Muslim. Kasi
parehong Muslim po, Muslim. Parehong Muslim po.
Parehong Muslim, no? Well, that depends kasi, again, sinabi pa ulit-ulit ko, ito punishing. Now, iba naman ang rules sa criminal justice system sa Islam. This will fall under what is called discretionary. In other words, kaya tatlo ang category ng criminal act sa Muslim law. One is hudud, that's punishable under the Quran. So very definitive yan. Anong mga elements of commission at saka penalty niya. Then the other is yung meron harmful effect or damage where blood and violence takes place. Kasas ang sabi namin dyan. And then that's where the blood money comes in for penalty. And then the third is this one, this category, punishable by act of the authority or by discretion of the judge, depending on the definition.
Okay, so ano po yung nun? Ano dun yung dapat mamayani?
Ang mayari dyan is if nobody prosecutes, then walang effect. Pero doon sa legality, ibang issue yun. It will remain invalid, not valid.
So maliwanag po yun. Pag meron dalawang Muslim na minors or underage at nagdesisyon mag-cohabitate or magpakasal, so punishable na yon under this new law. At hindi siya considered na valid. So it's void from the very beginning.
From the very beginning. The implication also means that it is an inhibition, a deterrent, both for the one administering the contract of marriage. Kasi kung betrothal lang, plain betrothal, in other words, there is no, you do not proceed to do the tinatawag nikah or contract of marriage, pronouncement of the rights of marriage, then there is no criminal act made. So two Muslims entering into just an agreement for their children that they will, especially when it is expressly said that upon reaching the age of, kasi ang sa Islam yan, puberty.
Oo, hindi nga. Pupunta tayo dyan
Yung
sa
sa
puberty.
babae, puberty, kung meron na siyang period of menstruation, then legally speaking, pwede niya siya ikasal. Pero normally kasi condition, that's why I said two things, status and condition. Yung condition na yun, maaring sa status, pwede na siya mag-asawa, pero physically, baka, there is something wrong or questionable about that capacity.
So pwede rin baliktad po, ano? Nandun yung condition pero yung status. Pwede rin po ba yan?
Oh, yes, it can be.
So yung betrothal, hindi siya kasama ron sa tatlong aspeto na tinutukoy dito sa bagong batas kasi may binabanggit doon, facilitation, may parusa. Solemnization, may parusa. Tapos may cohabitation, may parusa din. May fine at saka imprisonment.
But there is no mention on the word betrothal.
Yeah, so hindi siya kasama dito.
But I'd like to tell you, inform you that again, I checked this, sa lahat ng convention, meron mention of betrothal doon sa Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. In other words, it's a very broad convention because it is elimination of discrimination against women. So if we are talking of child rights, ang unang convention din ay yung labor, the labor law. Before women rights, before children and minors and minorities pala, minority communities, and the minor, yung child, they were protected by law together with women in terms of hiring sa law. So immediately there is this trend. Kasi po, Christian, ito yung tinatawag na mayroon anti-child marriage movement. Meron pong partnership ng global ito na movement, tinatawag Girls Not Brides. Yun ang title niya, Girls Not Brides. No?
Sikat po yung movement na yan.
The purpose is to end child marriages. In other words, if you go in a broad, napakalawak na definition, child marriages, na ito ang movement ngayon na naipasok dito. So balik tayo dun sa abolition. I will justify this, especially if it is discretionary punishment, diyan sa law, nito. At saka,
teka lang, liwanagin ko lang po yan. You would justify this new law if discretionary yung punishment, tama po ba?
Yes, under Islamic law, it is called discretionary. Ta'zir. Translation ito.
Okay.
Translation. In other words, if you look at the penalty provision of this law, definitely because it is a secular law, so it is direct. But pabalikan natin po yung kontrato. So kung ito'y agreement lamang para engagement, two parties coming into terms na mag-asawa. So you see, the woman is protected in Islam, yung getting married, jawja, yung pag-asawa sa babae, kaya kunin mo yung consent ng parents or guardian or the woman herself. If the woman is, again, yung age requirement is very important. Now, if minor talaga, there is no other way except to go through this consent system, parental or otherwise guardian. Now, if we go by the agreement na wala namang kasal, so there is no crime committed. There is no violation, in other words, committed because there is no marriage. That
So,
is putting it legally.
okay. So hindi siya dapat covered nung aspeto ng facilitation.
Classification ng marriage, child marriage,
Okay.
hindi dapat covered
Okay.
because it is betrothal.
Okay. Pero kung sakaling itinuloy po yung kasal, maliwanag na yan. Walang protection under Islamic law. So talagang bawal yung ginawa under the new law.
Yes. Yes. That's why I said it is prohibitive act. This prohibitive act is more than preventive act. Binabawal ta. I wish that the word shall abolish instead shall prohibit. Then it will be clearer. Abolish kasi even the act of the time of Lincoln, proclamation, tinatawag abolition of slavery. Hindi direct yung word abolition. Naging abolition lang because there was a movement called abolitionist movement.
Yeah.
Those who, whether black people or white people who did not believe in slavery, so they formed a group, not very many, but they were a group called abolitionists, and they were for advocacy of abolition of slavery. So if we translate that again, abolition of all that forms of traditional and cultural practices. The law is there already, so no need to interpret that except as it is now constructed. No? So when it goes to the Supreme Court, meron pa rin pagtalunan tungkol dyan ang nakikita ko. Because it brings about the end of all forms of marriages of minor child marriages.
Okay, so nakikita nyo na pwede ito i-challenge sa Supreme Court?
Yes, for test purposes, it can be challenged.
Pero kailangan may actual case po, no? Or incident? Hindi ito pwedeng facial challenge, no?
It should have an actual case. However, kasi maging liberal, because there is what is called modern legislation in Sharia principles. It does not change the moral principles of the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet or any of the other sources of Islamic law. But by modern payat, dalawa ang introduce ko dito, yung protected na ng state, yung public policy, siyasat o public policy. And then maslaha, yung public interest. Public interest, public policy. So, na-justify itong mga klaseng legislation kasi hindi doon sa category number 1 ng criminal justice system ng Islam. It's only discretionary to the authorities and the judge. It falls there. So there is a leeway for reinterpretation if you are liberal about it.
Sabi niyo po, you were consulted by our legislators nung binubuo nila, nung kinakraft po nila itong batas na ito. No? Tama po ba?
Yun lang general question. I did not see the other provision.
The general question only. Pero nung dinidetalye na nila, hindi na.
Yeah, general question. Will there be a violation? Or then I pointed to, yes, betrothal. Because even in the PD 1083, talagang may restriction. In all family codes, there are restrictions. It is not absolute capacity. And like even the word insanity is under that restriction, no? That dahil dun sa consent. The most important element is the giving of consent. There are other elements, but we are zeroing in on the implication of this Republic Act 11596.
Sa tingin
or
niyo po pala,
anti.
Attorney Mastura, unpopular po ba? Or sa tingin niyo magiging widely acceptable naman itong bagong batas sa Muslim community dito sa Pilipinas? Ano pong basa niyo?
What I see and I predict is as Muslims in the Philippines become more professional, become more educated, then they will not go into younger age marriages. They will not also allow their parents to dictate. Otherwise, there will be, marami na pong mga social problems diyan, nagdi-divorce. It brings up again, Christian, another element. Ang wala dito sa law na ito, yung context ng tinatawag na what are the remedies? So, example, in the case of the amendment of the family code, dahil sa Catholic Church, yung ecclesiastical courts, napakahirap magpunta doon for nullity of marriage.
Yeah.
So ito, meron ding question na nullity of child marriages. I hope, Christian, hindi tayo nagiging very legal sa discussion natin.
Hindi, opo. Actually, na-appreciate ko po.
Siguro.
Opo, nullity. Oo. Declaration of nullity of marriage. Okay. Tuloy po para mas maintindihan ng mga nakikinig at nanonood sa atin.
Oo, klaro din kasi ayaw kong ma-accuse na very high level, no?
Hindi, maganda nga po at least naiintindihan kasi nga yung iba rito nabulaga dito sa bagong batas, di ba? Well, many welcome this. Marami din nabulaga. Meron na pala. So, mas magandang mahimay.
Hindi academic discussion.
Hindi po. Go ahead, sir.
So, the only way is to bring in cases, no examples. Now, nullity. Halimbawa, yung pre-existing child marriages, in other words, nakapag-asawa siya dahil arrangement ng parents, and then normally it's the woman who will sue for nullity. Ito, meron mga cases na actual. No? Kahit na ngayon, meron yung tinatawag na walang cohabitation. Hindi na naging premature or hindi nag-mature to real marriage kung walang cohabitation, living together.
Nakasal pero hindi nagsama.
Hindi siya nagsama. So, maaaring ganun ang sitwasyon until mga 18 na siya. Or let's say even beyond, kung natahuan siya na maaari akong mag-file ng case ng annulment. Then in this case, there is a leeway, mayroong pagkakataon na man-nullify yung marriage. In the first place, with this law, ngayon, tinawag na from the beginning, null and void na. Walang effect. Sinabi dyan, no legal effect. In other words, there will be no rights and obligation between the parties.
Oo, kasi in the first place, wala rin yung very important element. Yung age, hindi sila pumasok doon.
Opo.
Kaso, nandun nga po yung penal provision, di ba? May parusa.
Yes. May parusa. Sanction yan.
Oo. So, hindi ba, for instance, unfair din dun sa, let's say, batang babae, batang lalaki na, kunwari, by force of circumstances, they were put into that situation. Siguro pressure of tradition despite this law.
Yes, that's why it's protective of the child and her rights. Maaring more damage or injury to girls or women, not more for the men, no? But it can also have hurt yung lalaki. Pero normally, itong tinutukoy dito, even in the convention, nakita po ninyo na yung betrothal doon sa yung anti-discrimination of women. Kaya pinasok doon. Dahil sa hindi pwede yung discrimination.
Pero by and large, ano po ang tingin niyo dito sa bagong batas na ito? Is this something na kailangan natin sa Pilipinas ngayon? given the realities that many communities, many families, couples are facing? Ano po ang tingin nyo rito sa kabuuan ng bagong batas?
Sa kabuuan, it follows the trend na kasi nasa isip ko kaagad yung trafficking of women.
Mm.
So, malaki global. It has become global whether we like it or not. Kasi, kaya even sa atin sa media, trending. Meron trending.
Yeah.
So, ang trend talaga is higher age level of marrying because of profession. The only setback is yung poverty situation or lack of education and poverty situation. Yung dalawang yung conditionalities, no? Otherwise, in terms of looking at it, you see, magandang topic ito dahil yung prohibition acts doon sa anti-slavery, nagkaroon ng civil war. Talagang matindi yung very violent reaction sa slave owners. Abolition din yun. Then yun doon sa abolition of yung liquor or production, trade of any forms of wine or liquor or beverages na talagang strong ang alcoholic niya. It's equivalent to drug trade ngayon. So, in other words, lumago na rin yung form of violations of this trafficking of trade. Pinapasok ko yan so that we will have a broader view of things. No? Hindi lang po. Kasi yung child marriages dyan sa mga communities, I have not mentioned indigenous peoples. Madalas din dyan sa mga indigenous people, tribal communities, yung child. And that is because yun na nga, kung ikaw ay educated na, pumunta sa eskwela, ikaw ay teacher, ayaw mo magpasok ng pag-asawa ng maaga. Masuspend yung desire mo to get married. So
at hindi
there
ka
are
At hindi ka pa handa.
Hindi ka pa handa. Maaring iisipin mo din yung paano ako mabuhay, no? I will separate from my pet. But these are the social side of or implications of this kind of legislation. This is a reform legislation. Whether babalikan ko yung question mo, we are ready for it or not. I think that this is the time to work out these things because there are overlapping issues. Hindi natin maharap itong problema na ito kung hindi ngayon. Ito na po ang panahon niya dahil maraming restriction sa galaw natin.
Tapos nabanggit niyo po yung social aspect or social side of the issue. Siyempre, may social cost din po yung early marriage, yung tinatawag na child marriage. Lalo, I suppose karamihan dyan, hindi naman yung talagang handa yung pamilya na ipinagkasundo yung kanilang mga anak, no? For instance, or pwedeng hindi naman talaga nagkaroon ng maliwanag na kasunduan, pwedeng nagkaroon din ng diskusyon between the two parties para magpakasal, no? Ano po ba yung pag-usapan po natin yung social cost niyan? For instance, doon sa batang babae at saka doon sa batang lalaki sa among Muslim communities po. Sabi niya naman hindi siya ganun karampant sa Southeast Asia, including the Philippines, compared to the situation in South Asia. Pero doon sa mga realidad na nakita nyo dito sa Pilipinas, let's talk about yung mga social cost nito in child marriage.
Ang nakikita ko lang is the issue of succession in terms of property. Kaya nagkakaroon ng idea na yung dalawang pamilya, they will continue the holding of properties. So it is protecting the family wealth. So diyan sa mga mamayayaman naman yung tinitwik, or it can even, we can go political, no? Political alliances. No? So they get their children engage or agreement to get married, betrothal, and then maaring hindi din matuloy kasi eh. So there is the other question, other than annulment. What happened? There will be suit for damages. So you can imagine that you prepared for it, yung celebration, walimas, tawag sa Arabic, and then pasubo ka, pahiya ka sa community, hindi matutuloy yon. Yun ang mga social effects. Now, it can turn into feud. Yung sa amin yung tinatawag na honor crimes. From this child marriage, it can evolve into rido or yun.
Baka namang families yan, no? Nakikita natin yan dati. Yung rido. Nagiging madugo po yan kadalasan.
Right.
Oo. So, sige, bago po tayo magtapos, Attorney Mastura, paliwanag din po natin yung yung isang provision doon sa bagong batas, sa RA 11596, no? Considered to a public crime that can be initiated by any concerned individual. Okay. Yung ibig sabihin po nun, public crime.
Kaya nga, yung public interest and then the protected interest dito sa Islamic law, yung maslaha o public interest, very, very justified na base ng law yan. No? It should be punished and as a deterrent. Kasi deterrent ito eh. Hindi ibig sabihin gagawin ng tao. Pero maaaring hindi mo gagawin dahil dito sa prohibition na ito. The other side of that, kasi criminal law, meron rehabilitation side, no? Meron yung consideration na, hindi matuloy yan. Hindi ka na i-punish. Merong mga mitigating circumstances. Kung once you prosecute. Now, anybody, let the courts play it. It will become tinatawag politics in law. The politics in law in the US is about yung abortion. I am bringing this concept because constitutional law is very, very clear sa atin. No? So maaaring ganyan, meron mga taong or lawyers who want to test it before the Supreme Court. So it becomes a politics of law in the sense that they will go all the way to the Supreme Court. Number one, they will get a name na mapunta sila doon sa record ng Supreme Court sa case of so
challenge.
Yes, yan yung Kramer versus Kramer. No? Yung din about abortion, mga things like that. So maaring mapunta ito sa yun. Pero not everyone is legally prepared to spend just to test this law.
Pero again, dapat may actual case.
Right. There.
Hindi ito yung pupunta ka sa Supreme Court para yung ginawa doon sa anti-terrorism law na facial challenge.
Correct.
It won't apply in this case.
Until there is a case at hand.
Okay. So yung po, Attorney Mastura, meron pa po ba kayong nakikitang ibang implikasyon nitong bagong batas doon sa umiiral na Islamic law dito sa Pilipinas po?
One last issue pa habol natin, no? Yung dahil sa interpretation ng act na ito, yung mga agencies involved. So napakarami, no? So maaring the other agencies of government in place na yan. The only sensitive thing is the one that refers to the Commission on Muslim Filipinos. So dapat pag-aaralan nila yan. Then, this brings the question also of now about yun na nga, legal effect of this punishment.
Ang tinutukoy niyo po rito yung no? Kasi merong provision dito sa bagong batas na inaatasan yung mga ahensya ng gobyerno, including the National Commission on Muslim Filipinos, to include in its program of action awareness raising campaigns within Muslim communities. No? on the
Mhm.
impacts and effects of child marriage in the overall health and
Yeah.
development of children, etc., etc. Ito po yung tinutukoy niyo rito.
Yan po, yan. Okay. So, importante yan to remind them, no, that this is a major legislation. Thank you po for
Okay.
inviting me once again.
Maraming salamat po, Attorney Mastura. Always good to have you, no? Napakaganda po ng mga paliwanag nyo. At sana naliwanagan yung mga nanonood at saka nakikinig po sa atin. So uulitin po, Attorney Mastura, we will invite you again on this podcast. Pero in the meantime, maraming salamat po at Happy New Year po, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's it for our podcast today. I'm your host, Christian Esguerra. Huwag niyo pong kalimutan to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. And of course, you can listen to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Stitcher. Maraming salamat po.